Hi everyone, welcome back to this video where we are going to talk about mix and yield variances. We use these variances when we are using two or more materials to manufacture a product. When you're using these two or more materials, you would have already decided on a standard mix or a standard proportion that you're going to use. However, when you change this standard mix or the standard proportion and you use a different mix, there will be certain variances involved. One would be related to the cost of this new mix compared to the original cost of the standard mix, and the other will be the output that you got from this new mix as compared to the output that you should have got from the standard mix. So this is what these variances talk about. Let's have a look at it in a bit more detail and then we'll solve an example or a question. So when you're dealing with a single material, it's quite simple to calculate the material usage variance, and we understand that how much output that we got from it. But like I said, when you're using two or more materials, it makes sense to split them into the mix and yield variances to understand the cost of changing that mix and also measuring the output that you're getting from this new mix compared to the original standard mix. Now remember, calculating these variances are only useful if you can actually control this mix or you can actually change it. If you're following a very strict production process or technique where you cannot change this proportions, then you cannot change it, and that means you're not going to have any variances and it doesn't make sense to even try to calculate these variances. Now, a mix variance, like I said, will occur when the actual mix of materials is not the same as the standard mix of materials or as they should have been. If your actual mix is cheaper than what it should have been, that is the standard mix, then you're going to get a favorable mix variance. On the other hand, if your actual mix of material turns out to be more expensive than the standard mix, then that is what it should have been, it's going to be an adverse variance. This is calculating the mix variance. Also remember that when you do change the mix, you're also going to measure how much output you've got, and then you'll compare this output with the output that you should have got with the standard mix. So if your new mix gives you less output than what you would have got from the standard output, it's going to be an adverse variance. On the other hand, if your output from the new mix is more than the standard mix, it's going to be a favorable variance. Now, almost always, whenever you get a favorable mix variance, you usually end up getting a adverse yield variance, or the other way around, that when you get an adverse mix variance, you usually get a favorable yield variance. Very rarely it happens that you get a mix and yield variable both as favorable or adverse. So now let's solve a question and understand these variances slightly better. So we have a very simple question over here. This is from your BPP F5 study text. So if you have the study text, you can follow that example and read more of the details which is given in your study text. We have a product here which we are manufacturing, that is D456. We're using two materials here, X and Y. We're using 3 kgs of X and 5 kgs of Y. The costs are given to us, that is 2 and 3.6, and hence each unit of D456 costs us $24. Now, the standard mix over here that is 3:5. So this is what we should use when we are producing D456. Now, during a period, that is period 2, we used 2000 kgs of material X and 2400 kgs of material Y. They costed us $4,100 and $9,600, and we produced 500 units of D456. So now, as we can obviously see, the ratio that is 2000 to 2400 is not the same as 3:5. That means the mix has been changed, and now we'll calculate our mix and yield variances to understand whether this new mix was favorable or not. Likewise, did we get more from this new mix or less? So coming to the first variance, we'll calculate the mix variance over here. Now, what we do is we first look at the total number of or the total kgs of the material that we have used. So we used 2000 of X and 2400 of Y. That means we used a total of 4400 kgs. So what we do is we simply split this 4400 kgs into the standard ratio, that is 3:5, and then compare it with the actual mix that we have used, that is 2000 and 2400. So when you split 4400 into 3:5, you get 1650 kgs of X and 2750 kgs of Y. Compare this with the actual mix, that is 2000 and 2400, and we notice that we have actually used 3500 kgs more of X, whereas 3350 kgs of Y less than what we should have. Remember, this should always be 0 because here the total is the same. Now, when we use 350 kgs more of X, the cost of X was $2. So that means in monetary terms, we are going to get 350 into 2, that is $700 adverse for X, whereas we have used 350 kgs less of Y than what we should have, and it costed 3.6. So what we are going to get is 1260 favorable. This is for Y, and hence our overall mix variance is $560 favorable. So basically what this means is, by using 4400 kgs in the ratio of 2000 to 2400, instead of the ratio 3:5, we were able to save $560. Hence, it's a favorable variance. Now, let's look at the yield variance. What we'll try to see is, by using this new mix, by not following the standard mix of 3:5, did we actually get the same output? Did we get less output, or did we get more output? In this case, first of all, let's remember the original production as per your standard mix was how much? It was in the ratio of 3:5. That means we were using a standard mix of 3:5, that is 8 kgs to produce 1 unit of D456. Now, how many kgs of X and Y have we used in total? We used 4400 kgs. If we were to follow the standard mix, then every 8 kgs would have given us 1 unit. So 4400 kgs divided by 8 should have given us 5500 units. But in reality or actual, we only got 500 units. That means we got 50 units less. And this tells us that our actual yield is less than what it should have been as per your standard mix. Now, what was the standard cost of producing each unit? 3 kgs of X into 2 and 5 kgs of Y into 3.6. We got the costs as $6 and $18, that is $24. So 50 units into your standard cost to $24, our yield variance is $1,200 adverse. So basically what this tells us, as a result of diverting from the standard mix of 3:5 to the new mix that we used, we were able to produce 50 units less, and hence our yield variance is $1,200 adverse. So while we got $560 favorable mix variance, we got $1,200 adverse yield variance, and overall you can see our adverse variance is more than the favorable variance, and hence the new mix is not really favorable. So this is how you calculate your yield variance. There's also something called yield variance for individual materials. In reality, this is not really useful, but sometimes in the exams you might be asked to calculate it for individual materials, and hence we will look at this variance also. So when you're looking at individual ones, what we do is we see that for our actual production of 500 units, we should have used how many kgs in the standard mix? 500 into 8, that means 4000 kgs. Split this 4000 kgs in the ratio that is 5:3, so you have 1500 and 2500 over here. Compare this with the actual number of kgs that you have used, but again split in the same ratio, that is 5:3. So 1650 and 2750. And now we can compare this. So we should have used 1500 kgs in the standard mix, but we used 1650. So that is 150 kgs adverse because we've used it more. Whereas here we should have used 2500 kgs of Y, but we used 2750. That means we've used 250 kgs more. That is, in total we have used 400 kgs more. Multiplied by the standard cost, so 150 into 2, that is $300, whereas 250 into 3.6, that is $900. The total will be the same that you got for the earlier yield variance, that is $1,200 adverse. So this is how you calculate the yield variance separately. So hope this example was good enough to explain the mix and yield variances. In my next video, I'll be talking or starting the planning and operational variances.